Tyson Fury versus Arslanbek Makhmudov, live and exclusive on Netflix, Saturday, April 11th. It is official, signed, sealed, delivered. And I'm going to tell you this, people, this is great for boxing. Why do I say that? Well, because it was my prayer that Netflix were going to get more involved in serious boxing, not the Jake Paul type stuff, but more involved in real professional boxing. Obviously, there was the Terence Crawford-Canelo Alvarez fight and show. I was hoping they would expand from that and do more. Obviously, this fight here between Fury and Makhmudov is not on that level, but it's still a real boxing match. It's not misfit stuff, okay? It's not a former world champion versus a YouTuber. And, Fury has been kind of playing on that since this fight has been announced. So I like it from the perspective of it being on Netflix, because DAZN have been taking the absolute biscuit. They've been taking advantage of boxing fans. They've been spamming us with pay-per-views. But here with Netflix, we get a break from all that nonsense, okay? Pretty much everyone has Netflix. Its reach goes far beyond, as far as I'm aware, any other streaming platform. And it's at no extra cost, because every time Netflix put on a fight, a real boxing match, the question always pops up, is this pay-per-view? Netflix, to my knowledge, have never done a pay-per-view. Okay, everything is included as part of the subscription cost. And it's the same for this fight. They've announced it as such, all right? So let's talk about the announcement. In fact, let me quote from the announcement here. You can see it on screen. The letters are a little bit small for my eyes, so let me get it up separately. It says here, Tyson Fury ends retirement in massive UK homecoming to face Arslanbek Makhmudov, streaming live on Netflix Saturday, April 11th. His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh in the ring welcomed the return of the former heavyweight champion in a clash marking Fury's first fight on British soil in nearly 4 years. He, as in His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh, Chairman of the General Entertainment Authority and President of the Saudi Boxing Federation, today confirmed the blockbuster The Ring showdown with two-time former unified heavyweight champion Tyson Fury, ending his retirement to face the devastating knockout artist Arslanbek Makhmudov. The event is set for Saturday, April 11, and will stream live on Netflix globally to its 325 plus million subscribers at no additional cost. This landmark event represents a major milestone, as this will be Netflix's first ever live event broadcast from the United Kingdom. This fight marks Fury's highly anticipated return to his home turf, nearly 4 years after his last appearance in a British ring. The Ring will lead the promotion for this heavyweight collision, with a specific venue and a star-studded undercard to be announced in the coming weeks. Netflix is currently in production with Fury on the hit documentary series At Home with the Furies. So the highly anticipated second season scheduled to premiere this spring. With the highly anticipated second season scheduled to premiere this spring. Alongside the series, Netflix is also producing Fury WT, what does that stand for? The definitive feature-length documentary offering the raw, unfiltered life of one of the most compelling figures in sports and British culture. His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh said, "We are happy that Tyson decided to come out of retirement for what should be an exciting heavyweight clash against Makhmudov." Tyson Fury said, "Excited to be back. Heart's always been and always will be in boxing. Someone go tell the king that the ace is back." Arslanbek Makhmudov said, "I am thrilled about the opportunity. I'm coming to deliver a war. Tyson Fury has been a big champion. I'll be more ready than ever, to leave with a massive W." Gabby Spitzer, Vice President of Sports at Netflix, said, "I have long admired Tyson Fury as one of the most resilient and captivating boxers of his generation. His career has been defined by beating the odds, and there is an undeniable electricity whenever he fights. We are incredibly excited to see him come out of retirement for this massive homecoming, and we love giving our members a front row seat to the next chapter of his legacy." It continues on. It's a bit long-winded, but bear with me. Ahead of the April showdown, Fury and Makhmudov will embark on a multi-city press tour to be announced shortly. It then goes on to talk about the ring here. I'll just show you what I'm quoting from. So it then goes on to talk about the ring here. Do I even need to read out all this stuff? Not really. Okay. So anyway, this is a good thing for boxing. It's bad when DAZN have a near monopoly. I'm happy to hear Paramount Plus getting involved, Netflix getting more involved and serious about boxing. It's an interesting move from Fury to fight on Netflix as opposed to DAZN, where his promoter, as far as we were aware, Frank Warren, has an exclusive deal, right? Fury is broken from that. Now, some people are asking, how can Fury do this? Isn't he a Frank Warren fighter? Well, he might be a Frank Warren fighter. Still, I'm not sure. But not all fighters have exclusive deals with a broadcaster, okay? And even the fighters who do have an exclusive deal with a broadcaster are sometimes able to get a one-off fight on a different platform, like AJ did, for example, against Jake Paul. That was on Netflix. And obviously, Fury's built this relationship with Netflix through his At Home with the Furies series, okay? And I saw an interview with Frank Warren regarding this fight, and he was a little coy. He said that this fight landing on Netflix had nothing to do with him. Again, which is interesting. He said it had to do with the ring people, you know, Turkey Al Sheikh and whatnot. So again, Turkey Al Sheikh obviously hedging his bets. That's been his pattern from a business perspective in boxing. He doesn't just hedge his bets as far as which promoters he decides to work with and back. He also hedges his bets as far as broadcasters. So he isn't just going all in on DAZN, he's also doing this Netflix thing. He's also doing a Paramount Plus thing. Do you know what I mean? It's not all his eggs in one basket. He's hedging his bets. He's seeing who can do the better job. And at the same time, obviously, expanding his reach, expanding the visibility of the brand, the ring, and Riyadh season and what have you. So yeah, very, very interesting and good for boxing that we're going to get this Fury fight on Netflix. Now let's talk about the actual fight itself. This is a perfectly acceptable comeback fight for Tyson Fury, aka Luke Partridge, given the fact he's coming off back-to-back defeats and a long layoff and he's 37 years of age. In fact, not only is it perfectly acceptable, for me, I wouldn't have even grumbled if he'd taken someone slightly softer than this. Because although Makhmudov is no great shakes, you know, he's not a particularly good fighter, he is a big guy and he is a puncher and he is aggressive. And he is coming off a win. Okay, it's over Dave Allen, but it's still a win. So I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with this fight. And I look forward to watching it, to be honest. You know, as much as I criticize Partridge, I have enjoyed watching him in the ring sometimes. Okay, I do think he's talented. I've always thought he's a very good fighter. My frustration with him has always been with his, how can I describe it? His unwillingness to take the fights he needs to be taking when he should have taken them. He tends to kick the can down the road and mess us around and lie to us, and you know, it's all very tedious. Okay, so you know, I got no issue with Partridge per se as a fighter. I've always had more of an issue with him as a character and as a businessman. So yeah, that's my take on that. But the fight itself with Makhmudov, I think, is a perfectly good fight, perfectly acceptable fight for Fury's comeback. I expect him to win, but there might be, you know, a little rough and tumble along the way. Again, especially given Fury's time out the ring. How motivated will he be for Makhmudov? He is one of these guys that tends to fight to the level of his opposition. When he's fighting someone that's not very good, he tends to look not very good. Not always. I mean, sometimes he handles not very good fighters with ease, as he did with Tom Schwartz, right? But then the fight after that, he fought Otto Wallin, and it was far more difficult than it should have been. I mean, so yeah, he tends to fight to the level of his opposition. I mean, he didn't look great against Pianeta in the fight before Wilder, the first Wilder fight. So that's how Fury tends to be. He's a very good big occasion fighter. Will this occasion get him excited enough to handle Makhmudov with ease? And does he still have it in the tank? There's a lot of wear and tear there. He always balloons up between fights. He doesn't live the life. Is it going to catch up with him against this particular opponent? It's possible, but I suspect not. I think he should be able to handle Makhmudov, even if it's a little rough for him at times. I think he should be able to get the victory. But what do you guys think? And how do you guys feel about this fight and the fact it's landed on Netflix? Let me know in the chat. Shout out to Matt Borges, and he says, "What's up? Hatman, I got Teofimo whooping Shakur by UD, grossly underestimated. Shushu Carrington to lose by UD to Castro, overrated. And Fury's going to lose too." Wow, okay, some big predictions from Matt there. Big up Matt every time. Big up James Wood for his super chat, which I did read out earlier, if he didn't hear me, because I did take a long time to start this stream. So big up. Big up Rich Franklin. He says, "I'm listening to Rastaman Vibration album." For me, that's my favorite Bob Marley album, is Rastaman Vibration. But yeah, as far as Matt Borges and super chat there, Teofimo whooping Shakur by UD. Hey, it could happen. It's a 50-50 fight, but personally, I've got Shakur winning. But it wouldn't shock me if Teofimo won, It's 50-50 in many people's eyes. For me, I see it as maybe like a 60-40 in Stevenson's favor, but in most people's eyes, or many people's eyes, it's like a 50-50. I see it more as a 60-40 for Stevenson, but we'll see. Not long now. Shushu Carrington to lose by UD to Castro, okay. And Fury to lose. I mean, that's the biggest prediction from Matt right there. Fury to lose to Makhmudov. Again, it's heavyweight boxing. Anything is possible. Fury's coming off a layoff, back-to-back defeats. He's 37 years of age. But Makhmudov is 36 years of age himself, so he's no spring chicken. So, yeah, big prediction there for Matt. We'll see. Charles B, big up. He says Luke by decision. Yeah, I think Luke probably by decision too. I'm not sure whether he'll stop Makhmudov. I think he can, but again, given the layoff and the age and all that type of stuff, maybe Luke by decision. But I reckon it'll be a decent scrap. Maybe a little sloppy in parts, but I reckon it'll be a decent scrap. John Boy says Makhmudov seems tailor-made for Fury. Certainly tailor-made for the old Fury. JR says, can a comparison with Partridge and Holyfield be made, considering they turn up for big fights but not consistently great? Yes, I think that is a fair comparison right there. A relevant comparison. Holyfield was very much like that. And this is a really salient point by Mr. Luca. Shout out to Mr. Luca for the super chat. He says, Frank's got problems with Turkey now, it seems. And you know what? That is an aspect which I didn't speak about up to this point. Yes, indeed. The fact that this is not being promoted, it would seem, by Frank Warren, and it's not being aired on DAZN. I mean, Turkey Al Sheikh still has a stake in DAZN, but surely Frank Warren would have preferred it to be on one of his shows. But this is being promoted by Netflix themselves. I mean, they said it there. Netflix in the ring will be the promoters, not Frank Warren. So this maybe does speak to a rift between Bricktop and Turkey. And actually, Eddie Hearn was asked about it. Eddie Hearn was asked in an interview today or yesterday whether Turkey and Bricktop have got an issue. And Eddie Hearn didn't deny it. He said, I don't know. If they didn't have an issue, surely Eddie Hearn is close enough to both of them to be able to say, you know? So for him to come out and say, I don't know, I think I can read in between the lines. Matt says, I've heard Turkey curses people out and is mean as F. Well, Eddie Hearn said that he's been cursed out by Turkey loads of times. But he says he gives it back. Yeah, I've said before, I don't think Frank Warren will appreciate being spoken to like that. And I think he'll take that kind of treatment a lot more personally than Eddie Hearn would. You know, Eddie Hearn, I think, is the kind of guy who, for the sake of the bag, can get cursed out and then forgive and forget and do business with you the next day. Yeah, I think Fast Car's more willing to do that. And speaking of people who are willing to forgive and forget, we can come back to this Fury Makhmudov fight. But speaking of people who are willing to forgive and forget, how about this, folks? Let me know what you guys think about this. And I did speak about this, obviously, in the previous stream. But Don Charles doing an interview with Seconds Out, and look at the headline there. I am not a yes man. Now, I'm not sure if Don Charles is trying to gaslight us or gaslight himself. Perhaps both, okay? Because here we have a guy who got dropped like a bad habit, used as a scapegoat. And even when he was with Dubois last time, he wasn't treated with much respect. I mean, whenever interviewers would try to get Daniel Dubois to give Don Charles respect, he'd always kind of brush it off, you know? So he was a yes man the first time he was in that team. He allowed all sorts of things to go on. And he was dropped like a bad habit. They went to Tony Sims. Tony Sims, I'm guessing, wouldn't put up with the father's interference. So they went back to Don Charles, a man who they knew would put up with the father's interference. And I think the reason that Daniel Dubois has bounced around so many trainers in his career thus far is because of the dad. Is because other trainers aren't willing to put up with the dad constantly butting in and the amount of control he has. But yeah, Don Charles is the epitome of a yes man. Yeah? But obviously he's a very prideful individual and he doesn't want to wear that jacket for appearance's sake. He doesn't want people to be saying that he's a yes man, but we can all see that he is. With that being said, as I mentioned previously, I don't have an issue with Don Charles as Daniel Dubois' coach, to be honest. I think a tree is known by its fruits and they've done good work together. Even if I don't rate Don Charles as a coach that highly overall, you know, sometimes the chemistry between fighter and trainer can just work, even if the trainer isn't particularly successful with other fighters. It can just work with one fighter. And I do think that he and Dubois have done, you know, good work together. So I give Don Charles credit, and I don't have an issue from a boxing perspective of them getting back together. But it is yet another example of how Don Charles is willing to park up his dignity to secure the bag. It is what it is, bro. The guy's trying to gaslight us into thinking otherwise. Shout out to Mr. Luker. He says, most overrated heavyweight of all time for you, Marciano? No, I think the most overrated heavyweight of all time is Luke Partridge. Yeah? And again, I always have to explain what I mean by overrated, because a lot of people use the term overrated as a pejorative, as basically a substitute word for rubbish. By saying someone's overrated, they're saying they're rubbish, they're trash, they're no good. I don't use the word overrated like that. I use it in the literal sense. When I say someone is overrated, all I'm saying is that they're not as good as the general consensus would have you believe. Okay, I think Mike Tyson's overrated, but Mike Tyson was still a fantastic and formidable fighter. It's just that his fans and casuals in general go way overboard in terms of how good they thought he was in his prime, in my opinion, or think he was in his prime. And with Luke Partridge, here we have a guy who, at the time when he beat Dylan White, had what was it, 4 or 5 world title fights total, 3 against the same guy. He knocks out Dylan White, who was just chinned 2 fights earlier by a 40-year-old Povetkin. And all of a sudden, people are saying he's the greatest heavyweight in history. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Seriously, I have never seen such a large number of people go so ridiculously overboard for a heavyweight before in my life. Partridge knocks out Dylan White, and now all these people are coming out the woodwork saying that he's the greatest of all time. Unreal. Absolutely unreal. I've never seen a heavyweight with such a thin resume get spoken of so highly as Partridge. Never seen it. So for me, he's the most overrated. At the time when he was champion, he was the most overrated champion of all time. Not because he's not good, because he is a fantastic fighter. It's just because people went so overboard in their praise of him. We got Mr. Luca. What about you, Mr. Luca? Who would you say is the most overrated heavyweight of all time? Indeed, Snoop Bob. TalkSport's glazing a Fury a few years back was laughable. Mr. Luca says Rocky Marciano will get smashed to bits by multiple heavyweights. He's 185 pounds. He'd do absolutely nothing today. I agree. Cal says the Gad is Fury's #1 glazer. One big rimmer. There you go. Big up Black Dynamite. He says, what shocked me the most was guys like Paulie, who knows his boxing, fall for the Fury hype. Yeah, that was unfortunate, wasn't it? Paulie Malignaggi and even Teddy Atlas fell for it. But it's the American effect, you know, it's the insular nature of American society. And, you know, those guys, particularly Paulie, Atlas, they came up in a time when America was dominant in boxing. And they just couldn't shape the perceptions that they had from the old American glory boxing years. The perceptions being, if you haven't done it in America, it don't count. That's basically it when it comes to boxing, yeah? If you haven't won big fights in America and beaten names that the American public are familiar with, then, well, you ain't proved anything. And so Malignaggi and Atlas were kind of victims of that. Matt Borgerson says, I think Atlas makes a lot of good predictions as of late, though. He knows what he's talking about. Well, Teddy Atlas, okay, refused to make a prediction for AJ versus Jake Paul. This is a fact, all right? You can go back and watch his pre-fight videos. In none of those videos did he actually give a prediction, which to me is pretty absurd, right? Why would you not give a prediction for a fight between a former 2-time heavyweight champion and a YouTuber? All right, he wouldn't give a prediction. All he said is that it's not going to be as easy as people think, but he didn't pick an actual winner. Go back and listen. But then after the fight, his son, who all his son ever does is just, you know, massage his dad's ego on that show. His son was saying, oh, you're bang on the money, bud. You predicted it exactly right. No, he didn't. He didn't make a prediction for the fight. He just kept, and that's important because in pretty much every other video, Teddy Atlas makes an actual pick. Yeah, but he did not make a pick for AJ versus Jake Paul, which for me is kind of shocking. But yet his son was giving him all this credit for a prediction he didn't actually make. Michael says, what happened to the previous co-host of Teddy's podcast? Yeah, Ken Bryder, I'm not sure what happened to him, but I suspect they fell out. Ken Rideout was very critical of the Saudis, and Teddy Atlas, of course, has been working with the Saudis. So I suspect Ken Rideout doesn't think Atlas is the man of principle that he makes himself out to be. But with that being said, you know, I do watch Teddy Atlas's videos. Yes, he can be very long-winded at times, but I do enjoy a lot of his insights and whatnot. But with his prediction stuff, he's been pretty good. But on that AJ Jake Paul thing, yeah, that was not good. Because most of us made a prediction for that fight. I mean, how could you not? It's AJ versus a flipping YouTuber. How could you not make a prediction? You know, I'd understand if it was AJ versus Partridge. You might want to sit on the fence because you're not sure. But AJ versus a YouTuber, you won't make a concrete predict? Like, come on, man. Johan says Teddy picked Dubois over Usyk, did he? I weren't aware of that. Chris says, I don't think Teddy needed to predict. Well, I think he did need to predict because he was emphasizing the danger in it for AJ. He was talking about, oh, this fight's going to be more difficult than people think and, you know, this, that, and the other. And then normally after saying all that, he'll give a prediction. But for that one, he didn't. And I was like, man, what an ultimate cop-out. But then after the fight, his son was giving him full credit for getting a correct prediction when he didn't actually make one. Unbelievable. Anyway, let's move on from Don Charles for a second here, folks. We've got some other news to talk about. How about this? Frank Sanchez versus Richard Torres set for March 28 in Vegas. Torres was offered the fight previously but turned it down. But then since everyone else in the IBF turned it down, they offered it to Torres again, and the second time he actually accepted. So there you go, it's set for March 28 in Vegas. What do you guys think about this fight? Me personally, I see it as very intriguing because on one hand you got Sanchez, who supposedly is 33, but I don't believe that for a minute. I think he's much older than that. He's been inactive. He's only had one win since that stoppage defeat to Caballero. He does have ability, but he is extremely frustrating to watch at times because he's so low volume. I mean, I remember when he fought Junior Farr, and for the first few rounds of the fight, Sanchez was throwing literally nothing. I mean, good God, man. He was throwing nothing, which allowed, obviously, Junior Farr to get into the fight. So he's extremely low volume, Sanchez. Even when he beat F.A. Jagba back in the days, he was quite low volume. So he's a guy that doesn't throw a lot of shots, but when he does decide to throw, the shots are usually high quality, fast, accurate, and in many cases powerful too. He's going up against someone who's almost like the polar opposite of himself. Torres is young, he's energetic, he throws loads of punches. He isn't as refined or as slick or explosive as Sanchez. Torres' shots are a lot more deliberate and more predictable, but there's a lot more of them. Also, Sanchez has been hurt in fights before, but my perception is that he's got a better chin than Torres. Yeah, he got stopped to the body in the Caballero fight, but Torres was hurt even against Guido Vianello by a jab. I mean, if Guido Vianello was hurting you with jabs, folks, there's a problem there with the punch resistance. Okay, so it's an intriguing fight. Torres kind of looks sloppy the way he fights, but his ring IQ is better than it appears. Okay, because when you see a guy who's kind of sloppy and his technique is a little ragged, you tend to get the impression that he isn't that smart in the ring, okay, because his technique is ragged, but that can sometimes be deceiving. Dillian Whyte was a little like that in his prime. Because Dillian Whyte had such sloppy technique, you tended to think, well, this guy can't really box. But if you actually watch him closely, he knew what he was doing and he was quite crafty in there. And Torres is similar in that respect. Yeah, although his technique can look sloppy at times, he is actually quite clever with what he's doing, including his defensive moves. Again, they don't look pretty as defensive moves, but he makes them at the right time. You know what I mean? Like against Guido Vianello, he was constantly ducking under his jab, ducking under his right hand, coming up with counters. Again, in a very sloppy way, but he was doing it nonetheless. So, yeah, Torres against Sanchez, I think it's intriguing. I'm looking forward to it. What do you guys think? Big up Matt Borges. He says, I got Sanchez. Torres is terrible in my opinion. I mean, I'm actually leaning slightly towards Torres, you know. So I'm going to depart from Matt on this particular fight. Don't get it twisted. I think Sanchez has got a real good chance of winning. But for me, there are more questions about Sanchez, you know? The inactivity, the age, the chronic issue that he's had with his knees. Even in the ring, he doesn't throw a lot of shots. So I'm actually more sided towards Torres. You know, as long as Torres can avoid getting hit with those very occasional power shots from Sanchez, I reckon Torres might just be able to outwork him. You know? Might just be able to outwork him. But as I say, if there is a knockout in the fight, I think it's more likely that Sanchez scores the knockout. I'm not saying Torres doesn't have the ability or, you know, power or anything to knock Sanchez out. If he put the right shots together, he probably could stop him. But as far as probabilities go, I think if there's a knockout, it will probably be Sanchez knocking out Torres. Because Sanchez, when he does throw, he's a very sharp puncher. And he's accurate and explosive. He, you know, catches you with shots you don't see. Whereas, as I say, Torres' punches tend to be a lot more predictable. But there's so many of them. And his defensive moves are a little more clever than people realize. So, yeah, I'm leaning more towards Torres, actually, to win this fight on points. Just outworking Sanchez in a close one. But we'll see. Galaxy Edit says, I can see Torres stopping him. The only thing I'd worry about is Torres' chin. I'll big up Matt again. He says, Torres got hurt by Curtis Harper, the quitter. Yes, he did. But Sanchez actually got hurt as well by a journeyman a few fights back. Did any of you guys see that? There was some journeyman who hurt Frank Sanchez early in the fight. In fact, let me look on Sanchez's BoxRec page here. Let me try to identify the journeyman who, like, quite badly hurt him. Let me find him for you. Frank Sanchez BoxRec. Let's look it up here. It may have been Scott Alexander that hurt Frank Sanchez badly. It may have been Scott Alexander. If it weren't Scott Alexander, it might have been his last fight against Ramon. No, but I don't think it was his last fight against Ramon. Is it Echeverria? I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. I think it was Scott Alexander, where Sanchez was badly hurt in like the second or third round. His legs went and everything, and his opponent, went after him. That's just some journeyman. Scott Alexander was 17-5-2 going in. Yeah, small heavyweight out of Los Angeles, right? 36 years of age now. Was actually knocked out in the first round by Kingsley eBay in his last fight. So go and have a look at, and I think it should still be on YouTube, Frank Sanchez versus Scott Alexander, and you'll see Sanchez get badly hurt in the fight. It was shocking at the time. To see him get wobbled by this guy. No, it wasn't Dubois. I'm not thinking of Dubois. It wasn't him. I know Dubois well. No, it was this Scott Alexander guy who hurt Sanchez. But big up Matt Borgerson. He says, oh yeah, it was the first, you're right. Yeah, it was some random journeyman. So here's my thing. When I have questions about a pair of fighters, I tend to go with the youth. I think youth tends to be more reliable than thinking about a fighter, a fighter's ability in their prime. So I tend to side with the youth. And look, Torres definitely has holes in his game. I think he's pretty chinny. But Sanchez, I just don't trust the age. I don't trust the inactivity, both as far as fighting infrequently and punching infrequently when he actually does get in the ring. Anyway, let's move on from this. We do have some other news here. Not sure how many of you guys will be interested in this one. Christian Mbilli becomes WBC champion and calls out Canelo for his next fight. What do you guys think? Christian Mbilli elevated to full WBC champ. I'm sure people are going to cuss him for being an email champ. I won't hold it against him. Mbilli has always wanted all the smoke. I don't think Mbilli is a particularly great fighter, but he's a very exciting fighter. I can't imagine he's going to have a particularly long career at world level with the way he fights. But there you go. He's action, all action. And he wants to fight Canelo. He was going to fight Diego Pacheco. I'm not sure what happened there. Instead, Pacheco's going to fight Hamza Shiraz, it seems, instead. Isaac Bling says he should rematch the last guy he fought. I forgot his name. Yeah, that's right, Lester Martinez. Matt's got the name right there. That was a good fight. If Lester Martinez was a puncher, then Mbilli would have been in all sorts of trouble. Matt says the fight that will 100% happen is Resendiz versus Canelo. Okay. Canelo looking to get a confidence builder in after being whooped by a welterweight. Shout out to Waved. He says, I don't know why, but I'm super excited for Kelly versus Murtazalayev. I think it was the face-off that did it for me, Hatman. I'm looking forward to that fight too. I think it's going to be very interesting. And I've been watching more of Murtazalayev today. And I'm not really sure how to define Murtazalayev's style, because he's not really a full-on pressure fighter. He's kind of patiently aggressive. That's the way I would describe him. He doesn't primarily fight on the back foot at all, but he doesn't apply anywhere near the type of intense pressure as someone like a Beterbiev, for example, a guy he's been compared to. Obviously is a lot smaller, but there are people out there saying he's like a mini version of Beterbiev. He doesn't fight as aggressively as that. You know, he's not as dedicated to front foot pressure as a Beterbiev is. Murtazalayev is kind of a bit more circumspect, and he works his way in behind his jab, and then he'll fire off combinations. But he won't just crash the pocket all the time. Now, his jab is good. Don't get it twisted. He's got a very good jab. And once that starts landing, you know, the hooks are coming after it. And I saw some training footage of him earlier on today, throwing uppercuts on the pad, or a right uppercut specifically on the pads. And I tell you what, if that right uppercut hits Josh Kelly, he's going to be in all sorts of trouble. But then Josh Kelly's got his own offense. He moves very well. He's more athletic than Murtazalayev. So it's going to be interesting, but I still think Murtazalayev wins the fight. And I think his jab might actually be key. Once he starts landing his jab consistently on Josh Kelly, I think that it'll be a matter of time before he breaks Kelly down, starts landing the hooks and whatnot, and probably stops him. Activistic Intellect says, I think Mbilli causes Canelo problems. Mbilli has marathon runner stamina, and Canelo's output is very low. Interesting fight if it happens. Yeah, I would say prime Canelo would eat Mbilli up, to be honest with you, because, okay, Mbilli throws loads of shots, but he's so open, and Canelo's going to just hit him with all sorts of clean counters. I think he's going to shut Mbilli. Either he would shut Mbilli's offense down with hard, clean counters, or Mbilli would just continue to maraud forward and get knocked out in the process. So either Canelo would shut down his offense by hitting him with hard shots and making him gun shy, or he would knock him out. That's what I think a prime Canelo would do. But this version of Canelo, I got to figure Mbilli's got a much better shot at victory. Shout out to Galaxy Edits. He says, do you think Makhmudov is done after his last fight? Did I see Makhmudov's last fight? Let me look it up. I'm not sure I saw his last fight. Let me look it up here. Who did Makhmudov fight last? Did I see it? Luis David Salazar. I don't think I saw the fight, to be fair. So I couldn't comment on it. Did he look really bad? I mean, on BoxRec it says he won 9 of the 10 rounds on the judges' scorecards. Were those fair cards? The guy was 20-1, Salazar going in. Is that the fight you're referring to? Evil Uncle Phil says, Kelly's getting stopped. Don't think it goes 6 rounds. Oh, it was on the Cruz Muratalla card. Yeah, I didn't see it. I didn't see the fight. Matt says, I'd be very shocked if Kelly won. And that card was terrible. Says Matt Borgerson. Big up, Matt. John Boy says, Murtazalayev, looked cross-eyed in the Kelly face-off. Isaac says, bad stain on Bud and Virgil Ortiz's resume. Galaxy Edit says he was winning, but wasn't moving like he normally does, and just looked dead, flat, and couldn't really hurt him. And it's not like the guy is ranked or anything. The old C says, what's up, Hatman? Have I missed the Partridge chat? Yes, you have, and we can come back on to Partridge, no problem at all. Here we go. Partridge versus Makhmudov. Saturday, April 11th, live and exclusive on Netflix. Not promoted by Frank Warren. Partridge appears to have cozied his way in with Netflix, and they're actually heading up the promotion alongside The Ring. Can't imagine Frank Warren's particularly happy about that, but there you go. Perhaps it's because, as Mr. Lucas suggested earlier on, that Frank Warren maybe isn't as close to Turkey as he used to be. Hence, he's not getting the opportunity to actually promote the fight. I'm sure he'll be still getting a cut. If he's still contractually Partridge's promoter, I'm sure he'll still be getting his cut of Partridge's purse, but obviously not from the gate and all the other stuff. And to reiterate my thoughts on this fight, I think it's great that we've got real boxing on Netflix again, involving a major name in boxing, Tyson Fury, in a real fight. It was I prayed that we would get more real boxing on Netflix after Canelo Crawford, and here we are, we're getting more real boxing. As far as the fight itself, I think it's a perfectly acceptable comeback fight for Partridge. Okay, Madrimov is not a great fighter, but Partridge is 37. He's coming off 2 losses and a very long layoff. I mean, you got to cut him some slack. You know what I mean? Got to cut him some slack. So, yeah, I think it's perfectly acceptable. In fact, it could be argued that Makhmudov is maybe better than Jermaine Franklin. Could you argue that? If not better in every he's not better in every department, definitely, but more dangerous than Jermaine Franklin, I would say. He's not as durable, but I think he's offensively more dangerous. And obviously, when AJ was coming off back-to-back defeats to Usyk, that's who he fought. He fought Jermaine Franklin. Now, I never had any issue with AJ fighting Franklin, but by that same token, I definitely don't have an issue with Partridge fighting Makhmudov. I think it's okay. So, is it Chikangana or Chick? Or Cheyenne Kaigana? Excuse me, is that how to pronounce it? They're saying AJ Fury will definitely be on Netflix. Well, this is what Gareth A. Davis is claiming. And if it is on Netflix, again, fantastic for boxing. As long as it's not pay-per-view, and Netflix haven't done pay-per-view so far, they haven't made any indication they're going to do any pay-per-views. They've got such an enormous subscriber base that the uptick in subscriptions is like a substitute pay-per-view. Do you know what I mean? It generates revenue the same way that pay-per-view does, but without actually having to do a pay-per-view, which is great for subscribers. So if AJ Partridge, if that fight happens later on this year, is on Netflix, that'll be one of the best things to ever happen to boxing, definitely this century. A fight of that magnitude landing on the most widely used streaming subscription platform. A platform which doesn't spam us with pay-per-views. So that will hopefully get DAZN to pull their socks up and start treating the customers better, giving the customers better value. Big up Matt for the super chat. He says, did you know Murtazalayev trained with Robert Garcia for years? There's footage of their training and Robert says he was a beast in camp 3 years ago. I didn't know that. I didn't know that, but then again, I wouldn't expect Robert Garcia to say anything else, to be fair. But, you know, there's no reason to think that Murtazalayev is anything less than formidable. Okay, your first name is said Jihan. Thank you for informing me on that. Jihan. Big up. Chris says, has AJ said anything at all? Not to my knowledge, other than, you know, some random motivational type quotes on his socials. But in terms of making a statement, I don't think so. Wave says, I wonder what Adam Booth is cooking for this fight. I used to love his interviews. Yeah, I was watching an Adam Booth interview with Boxing Scene with, I think Tris Dixon was the guy interviewing him. And it was a very interesting interview, you know, about this Josh Kelly fight and Adam Booth's career. Unfortunately, the interview cuts off at the end and you don't hear Adam Booth's response to Tris Dixon's question. So I hope they managed to upload the full thing, or maybe it was lost. Maybe Tris Dixon ran out of battery or memory on his SD card without realizing it. But yeah, it was a real interesting interview with the Dark Lord Adam Booth. I used to love those old Dark Lord days. You know, when Booth was doing interviews with Coogan and training David Haye and George Groves, and he's always trolling Coogan Cassius at the start of every interview. Used to love the Dark Lord days. Evil Uncle Phil says, Booth is cooking the same thing he cooked for Adalai versus Hergovich, a nothing burger. That's a great comment. That's definitely one of the comments of the night. A nothing burger. But here's the thing, folks. Most of us are picking Murtazalayev to beat Kelly by stoppage. If Kelly pulls this off, we got to give him maximum credit, and we got to give the Dark Lord Adam Booth maximum credit. So let's not make excuses. As long as there is no controversy, if Josh Kelly pulls this off, let's not make excuses. Let's give him full credit, because I'm not expecting him to win. Indeed, Cal, it's all a big club and we ain't in it. Big up Danny. He says Kelly will outbox him. He'll even win by stoppage, or he'll either win by stoppage or get stopped himself after running out of petrol. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We'll see. But we just need to give Josh Kelly credit if he wins the fight. Do you know what I mean? We need to give him the maximum respect, because how many of us are picking Kelly to win? All right, I reckon it's less than 20%, maybe less than 10%. Big up Charles B says, silly question, Hatman. Saw it on Twitter, but which fictional universe would you prefer to live in? Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, or Star Wars? I don't think that's a silly question. That's a flipping great question. Big up Charles B. I love random questions like that, especially related to movies that I enjoy. Which universe would I prefer to live in? With the risk of getting roasted here, with the risk of being roasted, I'm gonna say Harry Potter. I'm going for Harry Potter, folks. I'm going for Harry Potter. Because, you know, we're talking about living in the universe, not which universe I like the most. Yeah? The universe I like the most, it would be Lord of the Rings. Yeah? But the universe that I'd prefer to live in would probably be the Harry Potter universe. Yeah, he who shall not be named might be after me, but he's not as powerful as Palpatine, you know? Palpatine's way more formidable than he who shall not be named. So that's why I picked the Potter universe, because Palpatine's no joke, bro. Indeed, Lord of the Rings universe, crazy brutal. Sauron and Saruman and all that, that's dark. Orcs all over the place, nah, bro. Ring wraiths, that's long. What house am I picking? It's got to be Gryffindor, innit? Jonathan Porky says you're a wizard hat man. Cal says Johnny Fisher's dad, Jabba the Hutt. That's a bit harsh on Jabba the Hutt. That's a bit harsh. Fernie G says, when do you think Andy Ruiz will end up fighting? His leave has lasted longer than Partridge's retirement. We'll see. There's talk of him fighting Usyk, which means he must be having some conversation, or fighting Usyk in, or on, should I say, a Zuffa boxing card. So presumably Ruiz is talking to Zuffa boxing. We know that F.A. Jagber and Charles Martin are with Zuffa boxing now. Perhaps Andy Ruiz is next. So even if he doesn't get the Usyk fight, maybe we'll see Andy Ruiz on that card against maybe the winner of Jagber and Martin, or somebody else. So I suspect Ruiz will be back sooner rather than later. An argument could be made that he's one of the biggest wasted talents the heavyweight division has seen in the past 10 years. Maybe past 15 years. Danny says, the boy who lived will have to defend you. Charles B says, if I could just stay in the Shire and fish, I would take it. Yeah, the Shire seems like the spot. You know? Think about it. Like, Gandalf goes to the Shire to chill and bun herb. Do you know what I mean? He's always like kicking back, bunning with Bilbo. So, yeah, the Shire just seems like a whole vibe. Johan says, partying with the Shire chicks would be cool. Evil Uncle Phil says, Ruiz's lack of discipline is such a shame. I believe there are other heavyweights he would have caused upsets for, especially Fury. Here's the thing. Yeah, the long bottom leaf. There you go. John Boy says, wilding with the hairy feet Shire women. Oh no, the Shire women don't have hairy feet as well, do they? I know the men do. Yeah, here's the thing about Ruiz, right? Because in a previous stream, we were talking about Josh Kelly apparently having an issue with alcohol. People saying that apparently he said that he was drinking all throughout the Avanesian camp. And who knows, maybe for other camps too. And I speculated that this is his cope of dealing with anxiety. And somebody was saying it's a disgrace for Kelly to be that ill-disciplined. Well, I don't think, if that is the case, and Kelly suffers from like really bad anxiety and he uses alcohol as a cope, I don't think that's a lack of discipline. I just think that's a mental fragility, maybe even some type of personality disorder, I don't see that as like a sloppy-minded individual who just can't stay away from the booze and likes partying too much. I think it's a very different kind of scenario. I think Andy Ruiz is disgracefully ill-disciplined. Yeah, I think he's someone you could be a lot more harsh on, because Ruiz, as far as I can see, doesn't struggle with nerves at all. Ruiz has been fighting since he was a little kid. He's very naturally tough. He's talented. But unfortunately, he's like a happy-go-lucky type that likes to party with his friends and, smoke big sacks of kush and all that type of business. Kill it with the tacos and burritos and pizzas. So he just seems like someone that's good at fighting, but has absolutely no self-control or discipline whatsoever. I don't think he's drinking or smoking or overeating as a cope for anxiety. I just think he's a slob. Whereas with Josh Kelly, I got more sympathy, basically. I got more sympathy because he just may not be that mentally robust to deal with the pressures of professional boxing. Yeah, of course, alcohol can be very bad for anxiety and bad for all sorts of mental health issues. It can exacerbate them, and probably does in most cases, but the reason that people can get addicted to it is because of the momentary endorphin rush that you get when you take your first few sips. You do get like this rush of endorphins and this feel-good happiness that hits you when you take your first drink, but that subsides quite quickly once you keep drinking, and then you just feel monged out, and the day after you feel terrible. So you can get into a vicious cycle of constantly chasing that endorphin rush from that first drink. And some people obviously like the feeling of being detached from their senses because there are things that they're hiding from, conscious thoughts and stuff like that they're trying to escape from. So, escapism. And if you're someone that struggles with anxiety, again, I can see why they would try to use that as a cope. Have I ever took a drug before? I used to blaze the odd Zoot once in a blue moon when I was in my teens and 20s, but that's it, never anything else. When I say once in a blue moon, I'm literally talking about maybe a couple of times a year. If that, sometimes it'd be 2 or 3 years, then I'd blaze a couple times a year and then go a year or two without, or 3 years without. Back in my teens and up to maybe mid-20s. All right, people talking about Nathan Gorman. Well, he's been chinned quite a few times now, hasn't he? Chinned by Dubois, chinned by Wardley. Has someone else chinned him? John Boy says a wizard blazes precisely when he means to. Matt B says, Hatman, is Vianelo's power underrated? He KO'd Makhmudov and has 12 KOs in 14 fights. Maybe Makhmudov is better than we think. Could be a tough night for Fury. Okay, that's a fair comment. Even if Vianello hits harder than we think, he isn't a particularly good fighter, in my opinion. Torres handled him, other than that little blip where Torres was wobbled by a jab, he handled him with relative ease. He obviously lost to a Jagba, although the Jagba fight was pretty competitive. He did wobble a Jagba too. So maybe you make a fair point there. But I still think Makhmudov is very, very limited. Very, very limited. It isn't just based upon the Vianello defeat. Obviously, Cabello's a good fighter and he was stopped by Cabello, but even against Carlos Takam, Makhmudov had some trouble. Yeah, he dropped Takam a bunch of times, but he got hit with all sorts of shots himself. But fair point. Mac B Music, fair point. It might be a little rough at times for Partridge, but I do see Partridge beating Makhmudov fairly decisively. Strangingness says, if Makhmudov can go to the body, maybe he's got a shot. You never know what people are working on in the gym. Again, fair point. Sizzler says, quite tempted to try DMT, but I'd need lasers for it because I want to see code. Big up Danny, he says, would Canelo have more success against AJ than Jake Paul? That's a good question. I actually don't think he would. Yeah, I actually don't think he would because of the height and reach deficit. And I don't think Canelo's got quick enough feet to make up for the height and reach deficit. But by the same token, I think Canelo would beat Jake Paul. You know, styles make fights, different dimensions and all that kind of stuff. Danny says, what if he pulled out the back foot game like he did against Kovalev? Well, the problem with the back foot game is if a guy has got 10 inches in reach on you, like AJ does over Canelo, he's going to be hitting you with the long range shots when you're on the back foot. Do you know what I mean? I just don't see Canelo being able to reach AJ very easily at all. But I think AJ could reach him quite easily, even if he's just hitting him in the chest. So I just think the height and reach is just too much. Danny says, Callum Smith was a lot faster and as rangy as AJ. I don't think Callum Smith uses it. Well, he's not as rangy as AJ. He's not as tall, doesn't have as long a reach. Callum Smith is 6'3" or 6'4" and doesn't have as long a reach as AJ. And Callum Smith doesn't fight long. You know, he shells up and he fights you on the inside despite the fact he's really tall. AJ does a much better job, even though he's much taller than Callum Smith. He does a much better job of actually extending his arms and, you know, hitting you, keeping you on the end of the shots. And obviously Smith had an injured bicep in that fight too. So I think AJ's just way better than Smith. He's bigger, longer, pause, and just better at keeping opponents on the end of the shots. Shout out to Ivan, he says, Big Up Hatman would not be surprised if Fury gets chinned. I think father time and inactivity will get to him. So, shout out to Ivan. Your view may be sincerely held, but I'm also well aware that, much like myself, a lot of people in my audience don't really have much time for Luke Partridge because of all his silly antics and lies and gaslighting and, you know, ducking fights and all this kind of stuff, which I've criticized him and trolled him for over the years, justifiably so. But because of that, are some people picking an upset in this fight between Fury and Makhmudov through wishful thinking? Or has it got nothing to do with wishful thinking? It's like with Fury against AJ, you know, when that fight looked like it was gonna happen or the deal was gonna be put together prior to AJ being involved in that horrible crash, so many people saying AJ's gonna do him, AJ's gonna do him. Okay, I'm sure some of you sincerely believe AJ would beat him, but with at least a certain percentage of those picking AJ, it must be wishful thinking because of all Partridge's nonsense. You know? Chris says he's just a washed up fraud. I think that's harsh. I mean, well, okay, it depends on what you mean by fraud. As in the greatest of all time, greatest of his generation, yeah, he was never that. But he's a very good fighter, Partridge. Oh, okay, excuse me. Chris says, I misread his comment. He says, no, I said he's not just a washed up fraud. Okay, sorry, I misread your comment. All right. Furious Boxing says Makhmudov is terrible, stiff as a board and chinless. No ambiguity about your viewpoint. That's good. Jelly Mode says, I agree. I saw the news and various videos on YouTube about Partridge's return, and I haven't watched any of them. I can't be arsed with hearing about him coming back for the 5th or 6th time. Hazaroth says Partridge probably wins. Makhmudov doesn't impress me. Anthony YouTube says stylistically AJ is wrong for Partridge in my opinion. So any guy says, genuine question, who is the best fighter Fury beat at the time he beat him, not over their career? I still got to say Klitschko. I think at the time when Partridge beat Klitschko, that's the best fighter he's beat. I think that version of Klitschko would have beaten Wilder. I think that version of Klitschko would have beaten definitely Dylan White. And who else has Partridge beat? Chisora? I think Vlad. Wee Warrior says Wilder 2 was a great performance. Well, interestingly enough, the way that Partridge fought in Wilder 2 is very similar to the way that Vladimir used to fight. Yeah? Vladimir used to fight just like that. He'd pressure you on the front foot behind his jab, get you to overcommit on your right hand and counter you. It's actually very similar to the way that Vladimir used to fight. Cal says, Fury was talking about himself when he mentioned Dick Turpin. Okay, Sizzler says if Fury turns up like he did in the Ngannou fight, he's going to get stopped. So Alex says, the Fury we saw in the second Wilder fight was the best Fury we've seen. Youngish, well-conditioned, relentless pressure, not the best of Wilder, though. The thing is, I don't know how well that version of Fury would have done, even against Vladimir. You know, those tactics and that style was perfect for Wilder, right? But it doesn't mean it would have been perfect for every other style out there and every other opponent out there. I suspect it wouldn't have been. I suspect that there would have been other fighters he would have needed to have come in a lot lighter for and used different tactics. And I'm not sure, for example, there would have been people that he would have needed to move a lot more against. I'm not sure he could have got down to the optimum weight at that stage of his career to have beaten certain fighters comprehensively. So it's kind of difficult to gauge. See, this is the thing about Partridge. He had so few fights against top opposition that we don't really get a real gauge of how good he actually was in his prime, you know? Because there were so few fights at world level, or so few opponents at world level. It's hard to really know how good he was. Danny says, I don't think it was a perfect style. Instead, I think Wilder was caught surprised. Well, it's a semantic argument, really. It was the perfect style for Wilder that night, right? It wasn't the perfect style full stop. It was the perfect style for Wilder that night. And part of why it was perfect is what you alluded to there, because nobody expected it, least of all Wilder. I didn't expect it. And Wilder definitely didn't expect it. Which is why it was so perfect for that particular night. I remember when he beat, what's his name now? The German guy who's useless as hell. What's that? Tom Schwartz, right? I remember when he beat Schwartz and he was turning southpaw and throwing different punches from different angles against Schwartz. And oh my God, the hype from the Fury fanboys after that was crazy. He just beat up an absolute pie. And like the hype talk from Warren and Aaron, I mean, you'd expect it from them because they're his promoters, right? But oh my days, like, the Fury fanboys went so overboard hyping him after that Tom Schwartz fight. It was unreal. Look at the skill, he can go southpaw and orthodox and do this, and the punches he landed. I'm like, give it a rest. Bro, I can go southpaw and orthodox at 45 years old. If you put me in there against someone who's like 20 levels below me. I give it a rest. You didn't see any of that southpaw and orthodox stuff against Usyk, did you? Didn't see any of that switch hitting then. So let's have it right. Fury's not really a switch hitter. He's just a guy who messes around when he's fighting someone that isn't very good. He turns southpaw and messes around when he's fighting someone that's no good. Even against Dylan White, he only turned southpaw for a few seconds at the start of round 2. after Dylan White had fought the whole of round one southpaw. Yeah? So truth be told, Partridge is not really a switch hitter. That's just a little party trick when he's fighting lower tier opposition. But when he's fighting anyone that's remotely serious, he's not a switch hitter. Real switch hitters are people like Crawford. Yeah, Crawford is actually a switch hitter. That's a real switch hitter. Prince Nassim back in the days was a real switch hitter. He was an actual real switch hitting fighter. Then he says, did Crawford switch against Canelo? I don't think he did, but Crawford will pick a stance. You know, Crawford switch hitting is normally a case of he'll pick a stance quite early in the fight or from the beginning of the fight, and he'll stay in that stance for the whole fight. So for some fights, he comes out southpaw, or maybe he switches for the first round, and then he'll stay in one stance for the whole rest of the fight. So he isn't a guy that just switches for the sake of switching. He'll fight out of whichever position he thinks is advantageous against a particular opponent. And then he'll fight like the whole fight like that. And he's done that obviously at, you know, world title fights. Lucan says Chisora is more of a switch hitter. Well, yeah, Chisora actually was switch hitting against Usyk. Tony S says, DeGale was great at switch hitting seamlessly from orthodox to southpaw. You know, for me, DeGale overdid it. DeGale was one of these guys who would switch for the sake of switching. And I think it got him in trouble in a lot of fights, to be honest, where he would just switch too much and, as they say, end up confusing himself. Oh wow, never knew that. Chris Lee says, Usyk said I won't leave you alone because Fury described in his book how when he was younger, he thought his family would pack up and disappear and he'd be left alone. That's a weird fear. Why did he have that? That's a weird fear. And very clever if Usyk was playing mind games in that regard. Danny says, T.O. the funniest boxer right now. I've never found T.O. funny. Who's the funniest boxer right now? Lawrence Okolie's up there. He's funny. Usyk is funny. What other funny boxer? I mean, Chisora's funny. Who else is funny? Usyk, Chisora, Okolie. Who else is funny? Any guy says Eubank's funny. Eubank was funny. Up until that Conor Ben rematch, and now he ain't funny no more. That was just sad, you know? That was just sad. Galaxy Edit says, I don't find Okolie funny at all. I find him such a boring person. Maybe you haven't seen the interviews where he's being funny, or maybe you don't get his deadpan humor, because Okolie is such a troll. Like, when he did that press conference, when he was going to fight Richard Riakporhe, and with a straight face, it's like, Madonna ain't, what did he say? Madonna ain't hot anymore or something. And the way he's been trolling Richard Riakporhe is hilarious. The way he keeps trolling Dylan White is hilarious. You know, saying that Dylan White sold his bum to Moses and all this kind of stuff. Like, Okolie is hilarious, bro. I don't know, maybe some people aren't catching it because Okolie says this stuff with a straight face. He literally doesn't even smile or laugh or chuckle when he says it. And that's why it's so funny. He's deadpan. They just sit there with a straight face and say the wildest stuff. Yeah, he's definitely a troll. Lawrence Okolie's a big, big troll. Chris says people don't see. Yeah, people don't see. But again, the sold his bum to Moses line was savage. And he'll just drop lines like that mid-interview about Dylan White. Oh dear. Exactly, Striker. Okolie's funny because he doesn't sell his jokes. Danny says Tio is actually humorous. I've never found Tio humorous, to be honest. In fact, I can't think of any of them Americans, other than Jarrell Miller. I can't think of any American fighters that are funny. That have been around over the past few years. Like, it's just Jarrell Miller. Jarrell Miller's funny. But other than that, no one's funny. You know? Tank ain't funny. Mayweather was never funny. Shakur Stevenson ain't funny. Devin Haney ain't funny. I don't find Tio funny. Crawford, I mean, he's not really that funny, is he? You might have the occasional little joke, but Crawford's not particularly funny. I think one of the reasons that these American fighters are not funny is because they all take themselves so seriously. You know, they all act like divas and aristocratic kings. You know what I mean? It's just, I don't know, man. American fighters these days ain't funny. People saying AB's funny. I never found AB funny. I never found Broner funny. I just found him like an idiot, you know? Yeah, corny to me more than funny. Broner was never funny to me. You know, the only people funny in American boxing tend to be the dads. The dads are funny. Angel Garcia was hilarious. Robert Garcia's dad was funny. You know what I mean? Like, the dads are funny. But the fighters, no. Yeah, Shannon Briggs was definitely a good laugh. But he's one of the older generation. He's one of the generation that didn't take themselves too seriously, you know? Because the current generation of American fighters, they think they're all rappers. All of them have got albums, you know? Rap albums. Yeah, again, people are saying Briggs, but he was part of the older generation. I'm more talking about the more recent generations. Again, De La Hoya is part of the older generation. This, like, more recent generation, like post-Mayweather is what I'm really referring to. Mayweather and post Mayweather, that generation or those generations of American fighters are just not funny. Because they all think they're too cool for school. They all think they're like rappers with loads of bling and they take themselves so seriously and turn their noses up everywhere. It's just, you know, there's no humor there. Johan says Frotch is funny. Well, again, I'm talking about the newer generation and I'm talking about Americans. I'm not talking about Brits. There's still loads of funny British fighters. Abdul says Fury is skillful, but I feel like a lot of it is his huge dimensions allowing him to do those things without people being able to capitalize on it because he's so massive. He makes a lot of sloppy mistakes. That's a good comment. That is a good comment because in the Usyk fights, particularly the first fight, we saw exactly that. You know, he was doing things in the early rounds that he was getting away with because he had enough quickness to pull his head out of the way and feet out of the way, right? But in the later rounds, those same defensive moves he was making early in the fight were getting him clipped because he was slowing down. Didn't have his hands in the right position. He was pulling back in straight lines with his back against the ropes. A huge no-no. So yeah, he makes lots of technical errors, Partridge, and you know, he's been dropped God knows how many times. So yeah, you're right. It's a very, very good comment. I've had all sorts of different tea. Peppermint tea, yes. Chamomile. Um, Ginger tea, obviously. Sorosy. I'm drinking this African tea out here called Rubios. Rubos sounds like that wizard from Harry Potter, the groundskeeper. Wasn't he called Rubius? Roy Boss? I think it's called Roy Boss. Been drinking the African tea. Hazarov says tennis sucks, just like all sports except boxing and MMA. Yeah, I've never been a tennis guy, but I don't mind athletics. You know, some of them anyway, the short races like 100 meters and whatnot. I've always liked those. You know, I saw a clip recently of DC, Daniel Cormier, speaking about the punching power of boxers compared to MMA fighters. And I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember what he said word for word, but he basically said that, unsurprisingly, boxers punch way harder. He said when he started sparring boxers, he was basically shocked at how hard they hit compared to MMA fighters. And that was with sparring gloves on, you know? Which is why, despite wearing 4 ounce, you know, being hit with 4 ounce gloves and all this kind of stuff, um, Ngannou's chin didn't really mean much in a boxing context, did it? The first time he got hit by a real good puncher in a boxing ring, he was flat on his back. Because the punches in boxing are different than MMA. Punching technique is far more refined in boxing than it is in MMA. In MMA, it's kind of sloppy. And the fighters are maybe a little reluctant to fully commit with punches in the way that boxers are because they're always, you know, half thinking about getting taken down or kicked or whatever the case may be. Where in boxing, you can fully commit to a punch. And it's only going to be a punch coming back. That's all you have to defend against. You don't have to defend against kicks or takedowns or any of that, or spinning elbows or anything. Knees. So yeah, look up that clip if you see it of DC Daniel Cormier talking about how boxers hit a hell of a lot harder than MMA fighters. Punch, should I say. Obviously, punch a lot harder than MMA fighters. Sports fan says Riakpo being seen with Madonna is even stranger if you're from his area around his age. A guy was as deep on the roads as one can get, seen with a granny. It's weird. Well, I think that's a little hyperbolic. He definitely wasn't as deep on the roads as one can get, but I take your point. With that being said, a lot of them roadmen are weirdos, bro. So actually, it's not that strange because honestly, a lot of them roadmen are weird as hell. Loads of them are weird, bro. Very weird. And usually the more violent ones are the weirdest of all. Shout out to Chris for the super chat. Much appreciated, sir. Active Learner says React Poor on road, moving to grannies. Is that why he got chefed up? I'm not saying it was. Maybe that's a really, maybe that's a, a really distasteful joke. Because it weren't funny what happened to him, but who knows? I mean, President Brush says word to DVS. Yeah. The less said about him, the better. Dear, oh dear. Because the thing that DVS got locked up for is only scratching the surface for how weird he is. He's way, way weirder than his conviction would have you believe. So DVS was a roadman and rapper from Brixton who got locked up for like 25 years or something for some SEX crime. But the stuff that that guy did, bro, is way, way weirder than what he was locked up for. Way weirder. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. He says, what did you think of Eddie saying he was losing so much money on Jai? I think he had someone very promotable. Well, Eddie's always going to come up with some excuse when he fails at something, isn't he? He didn't invest in Jai the way he needed to. Apparently, DAZN didn't want to show Jai's last fight. And Eddie wasn't willing to put his own money up. So, yeah, Eddie Hearn is not a guy that likes to invest a load of money to get a return. If you're looking for that kind of promoter, you go to Frank Warren. Eddie doesn't like investing a load of money up front to try and build your profile. He doesn't like doing that. He likes you to do more work than him. He likes you to get on social media, start calling people out, doing all that kind of stuff. But he doesn't like to actually have to do, well, no, he can promote you as far as, talk about you in interviews. But as far as spending money promoting you, he doesn't like doing that. Not unless you're already built, not unless you're already a commercial commodity. If you're not, he doesn't want to have to do it. Indeed, as Cal pointed out there, Matchroom haven't won a purse bid in a very long time, or very few purse bids. I think they actually did win one recently, but it's few and far between, which shows you their business philosophy. Yeah, they don't like taking a punt on fights or fighters the way they see it. They don't like doing that. All right, peeps, I'm going to wrap this one up. You know the routine. Shout out to everyone for joining me in this conversation. And a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were James Wood, Matt Borgerson, Mr. Luca, Charles B, Danny, GMS Nightmare, Chris, and D-Man. Big up, big up. And like I say, the rest of you, it's been great chopping it up. Take care, be good. Until next time. All right, I'll see you on the other side. I'm out.